I want to give you a little bit of background. So first of all, can one of those of you who's new today tell me what Wikipedia is? Go ahead. An online information source. That's absolutely correct, but it's not a complete answer. Anybody else? Okay. It's an encyclopedia. It's a free encyclopedia. That's free as in beer and free as in speech. So you can do what you want with it, and we will never make you pay us. We will ask you for donations from time to time as Wikipedians. Thank you if you already donate. But it is completely free to use and free to reuse. So you or anybody else can take content from Wikipedia and put it in your own resource, in your books, your journal articles, your own website, and use it for free, as long as you say where you got it from. That's all we ask for, just attribution, what we call an open license. And the same applies to most of the images on Wikipedia, not all of them, not the ones that are book covers and CD covers and a few others. And later on today we can show you how to tell whether an image is free to reuse or not, but most of the images are freely available for you to reuse. So it's a free encyclopedia that anybody can edit. And today you're the anybody. You're going to learn to edit Wikipedia and going to make some edits to Wikipedia. So that's what Wikipedia is. You know, it's not just an encyclopedia, it's not just an information resource, it's the free encyclopedia that anybody can edit. And those are its USPs. Those are the things that have made it such a big success. So who actually owns Wikipedia? Well, that breaks into two parts. The first part is the content is owned by the people who make it. So when you edit Wikipedia, you agree to the terms and conditions that say that you release your contribution under that open license. You give permission for anybody to reuse it, and all that you get in return is a credit that this came from a Wikipedia article that you edited. You don't get payment for that, but you are entitled to that attribution, and theoretically you still own the copyright in your work, and you can complain if somebody uses it without attribution. So that's the actual content, and the same again applies for images. If you take a photograph and upload it under an open license, you retain the copyright, you just give permission for other people to reuse it. Excuse me. But the other half of owning Wikipedia is the concept and the brand and the hardware, and that's all vested in a not-for-profit institution in America called the Wikimedia Foundation. It's the equivalent of a registered charity in this country, in other words. And many years ago, Jimmy Wales and his colleagues, when they set up Wikipedia, intended it to be a business and realised that it wasn't viable to make money off something if you were asking people to volunteer to build it. So they gave everything that they had then, one server, those were the days, and the intellectual property rights in the content and the software, and a little bit of money, and set up this foundation. And that foundation, which has a board selected from Wikipedia editors and other interested parties, collects that money, collects those donations that we ask for every year. And people are very generous because Wikipedia is so ubiquitous and so popular. We hit our fundraising targets very quickly. The foundation get a lot of money, and then they spend it. And they spend a large portion of it on keeping everything running. This is the 5th biggest website in the world, the English Wikipedia. And it takes an awful lot of server power and electricity and air conditioning to stop the heat from the electricity and the servers melting the building, and staff to keep it running. Not a lot of staff, quite a small number, but they still have to be paid and fed and so on. And some of the money goes on that. There are 2 or 3, possibly 4 data centers around the world, so that if a meteorite hits California or wherever it's located in America, there's a backup in Europe and a backup in Asia, so we won't lose it all, thankfully. The rest of the money they give in grants. So they give money to national chapters. There's one in the UK, Wikimedia UK, and they give grants to individuals and other organisations. So once you're a Wikipedia editor or you contribute to one of the other projects and you can demonstrate your involvement, you can apply for a grant. And that can be a travel grant to go to a conference, or it could be a grant to buy some scanning equipment or a camera to take images for the projects. And there are various other things as well. But the money is sort of reinvested in keeping the projects running, and a little bit of it is being taken off to set up an endowment fund in case those donations ever dry up. But that's the Wikimedia Foundation for you. What they don't do is they don't own the content. We as editors own the content, and they very rarely intervene in content matters. So they have the status in American law, whereas they're not responsible for what we write on Wikipedia, and so they keep a very arm's length from that. But if there is an issue where somebody will complain to them that there's some child abuse going on or something terribly libelous, they may sometimes intervene. And similarly with copyright infringements, they may sometimes intervene to remove something that's criminal or libelous or simply a breach of copyright. Other than that, they don't get involved in deciding whether we capitalise headings or italicise them or whatever else. That's nothing to do with them. That's down to the community. Which brings us to the community itself. And by the end of today, you will all be members of the Wikimedia community, because by editing, that act simply makes you a member of a community of people who've contributed to Wikipedia. That community is supposed to be the nearest thing we have to an anarchy, and it actually works. So there are very few rules, and there's very little hierarchy. I mean, it's made up of humans, so both of those statements aren't completely true. But in theory, nobody has the power to say, I'm in charge of you, I'm going to tell you what you must do. What happens is we resolve issues through discussions. So if there's a dispute about how the content should be worded or which image we should use in an article, you go to a discussion page and you talk about it until everybody agrees. Now, that's sometimes easier for some subjects than others. So if you're talking about which is the best picture of this Victorian physiologist to put on their article, the one where they're facing left or the one where they're looking at the camera, sooner or later everybody will agree which is the best picture, or at least agree to disagree and work on a compromise. If you're talking about how to describe the Israel-Palestine conflict or the gun laws of America, you're probably going to find those discussions never actually get resolved and they're just rambling on forever. We have to sometimes agree to differ or find a way to take a middle road. But most of the time you can sort stuff out through discussion. And that's your first port of call. If you do something on Wikipedia and somebody undoes it and you want to disagree with them, you don't go and do it again. That's called edit warring. And what will happen is they will undo it again and you will do it again, and then suddenly both of you are blocked for editing for 24 hours. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to be discussing things with people. And again, during the day, we'll show you where and how you can do that. That community of editors don't just run one Wikipedia. We talk about Wikipedia in the singular because most of us in here are native English speakers, and we possibly only speak one language. The English Wikipedia is what we think about and talk about. But there are actually around 300 Wikipedias. So there is a French language Wikipedia and a German language Wikipedia and a Russian language Wikipedia and Japanese and Chinese and Croatian and African languages and South American languages and indigenous languages in different parts of the world. Notice that they're French language Wikipedias and so on. They're not the French country Wikipedia. So the French Wikipedia is owned by the community around the world who edit Wikipedia and speak French. Now, they might be in France or Switzerland or the African countries that still speak French, or French Canada, French-speaking Canada, I mean. And that's that community. And the same with the German Wikipedia, belonging to the people of Germany and Austria and Switzerland and the parts of America where Germany is still the main language and so on. And indeed German speakers in this country who happen to live here or whatever. Or anybody with an interest in the language. So they're not country-specific Wikipedias. Like I say, around 300 Wikipedias. Some of them are very small, therefore endangered languages. Languages you've never heard of. I bet none of you could name 300 languages if we spent all day trying to do it. So there are some that you've never heard of. Sometimes they're the only online resource in that language, or the only significant online resource. And in the case of the Welsh language, it's actually the biggest online resource in that language, even though it's a widely spoken language in parts of the UK. So quite significant for the Welsh government, who've put money into developing it, for instance, and supporting editathons like today's in Welsh. As well as all those Wikipedias, the Wikimedia Foundation and the community behind it host about a dozen other projects. I'm not going to name them all and describe them all, but I'll just run through a couple. The first one, and one of the most significant to Wikipedia, is Wikimedia Commons. And you'll often hear people talk about that just as commons. And that's where we store all the images and video and audio. And the reason for that is that we can store them once and then display them on 300 different Wikipedias. So we don't have to upload the same picture of Tim Berners-Lee 300 times for his biography on each Wikipedia. We put it in one place, and then everybody can call it from there into their articles. But Commons doesn't just have the images that are on Wikipedia. So to take Tim Berners-Lee as an example, Commons will have 20 or 50 or 200 pictures of him. His biography will have 2 or 3 pictures, and at the bottom it will say Wikimedia Commons has more media about Tim Berners-Lee, and the same for a building or a city or any other topic you care to mention. So we have this repository of additional media that's available. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is obviously that you might want to choose a different image to put in a Wikipedia article. You know, if you're writing about Tim Berners-Lee somewhere else on Wikipedia and you want to use his picture, you might want to use a different picture just for the sake of it or for variety, or because it's him in a particular place or at a particular event that you're writing about. And as I said earlier, all of the images on Commons are freely available for reuse. So you can go there and use it as a stock image library for your own website and your own publication. So everybody who's put media on there has either done it under an open license, or because it's not copyrightable, because it's made by the American government, for instance, or because the copyright has expired. So Victorian artworks where the artist died over 70 years ago, for example. Excuse me. So where there are images that are not copyright free, like book jackets or album covers and film posters, those go on the Wikipedia. Everything else goes on Commons, so everything on Commons pretty much is free to reuse. That's one sister project, and it's a multilingual project. There isn't an English language one and a French language one. We simply have bits of each language in one project. The next most important one for Wikipedia, the newest of all the sister projects, and the fastest growing, is Wiki Data. Now, Wiki Data, I get a bit technical here, is a linked open data repository. So it's linked data and it's open data. If you don't know what those terms mean, I'll be happy to explain them later, but in very simple terms, what we put on Wikidata are statements about things. So when you look at a Wikipedia article, you sometimes find a box in the top right-hand corner called an info box. And for Tim Berners-Lee, it will say his name is Tim Berners-Lee, and his birthplace is this town, and his birth date is this date, and his nationality is British, and he's got a knighthood, and he's got a, I don't know what else he's got, you know, Nobel Prize or whatever he might not have won. And each of those can be represented as a statement. The award equals the OBE or the knighthood, the birthplace equals the name of the town. And we store those statements in Wikidata, and we can call them into those info boxes and into other templates in Wikipedia automatically. So again, we store them once rather than storing them 300 times. But again, Wikidata has lots more information than is in Wikipedia, and that's queryable by computer. So you can write a computer program or a computer script and say, tell me all the cities in the world that have a female mayor. You imagine walking into your local library and trying to research that. It would take you a lifetime and be out of date by the time you've done it. In Wikidata, it responds in under a second. So you can again put the results of those queries into your website or display them in your mobile apps for free. But that information is also feeding into Wikipedia. And Wikidata also acts as a hub between Wikipedia articles. So where we have 200 articles on Tim Berners-Lee, one in English, one in French, one in German, Wikidata knows what they all are and supplies to each Wikipedia a list of all the others. You'll see that down the left-hand side of a Wikipedia article, a list of all the languages that that article is in. That comes from Wikidata as well. And Wikidata also has multilingual labels and descriptions of things. So for Tim Berners-Lee, the label in every language is Tim Berners-Lee, usually written in the Western script unless it's Chinese or Japanese or Russian. But for cheese, the food product, it's Käse in German and fromage in French, and goodness knows what in every other language, usually different. And you can query that and get the words in lots of different languages and a description, food product made from milk, or whatever it would be, in lots of languages. So even if you don't speak those languages, you can now write a menu for a restaurant or a list of ingredients for a food product and display it in the user's preferred language. How many of you speak or read and write more than one language? Right, got extra special jobs for you to do today, because putting those multilingual labels in is really useful. And we can show you as part of this afternoon's work how to configure Wikidata to use multiple languages. So that's the next biggest sister project. And then the other sister projects, it's the long tail type graph. They're much smaller, but they have dedicated people working on them and they're very useful. So we have wiki source, and that's where you put open license or out of copyright text articles. So it's like Wikimedia Commons for text. So articles from the Physiological Society's journals from 100 years ago that are now out of copyright. The works of Chaucer and Shakespeare and the equivalent in Arabic and other non-Western cultures go into Wikisource. Open source scientific articles that are published today can go in there if they're under an open license. We have Wikivoyage, which is a really good travel guide. If you're going to a foreign city for your holiday or for work, it'll tell you how to get from the airport to the city centre most economically, and where to buy a ticket, and which parts of the city are good for food and which parts to avoid at night because they're crime-ridden or whatever. So Wikivoyage is really useful. We have Wikiversity, which are learning modules where you can teach yourself about a subject. We have Wikibooks that provides e-books that you can download and put on an e-reader. So they're like a collation of Wikipedia articles rewritten in book form, if you will. We have Wikiquote, which is quotations by notable people or about notable subjects. So some of them are funny, some of them are profound, some of them are historic. You know, we will fight them on the beaches and all the rest of it. That goes into Wikiquote. And there are more projects behind. Like I say, I'm not going to list them all, but you will find them all on the main page of every project. You'll find all the other projects listed. So that's where they all are, all our projects, and that's the sorts of things that the Wikimedia Foundation and its community of volunteers supports. So today we're going to mostly be looking at Wikipedia. We'll probably dabble a little bit with Commons and Wiki Data, especially if you create a new article. We might go and look for pictures for it, or we might create the equivalent on Wiki Data so we can cross-link with foreign language articles about the same subject. The rest, not so much, but bear it in mind because you might find Wikipedia is not your thing and one of the other projects is. Or you might have a specific purpose in mind, like I want to put a copy of this Victorian scientific article somewhere where other people can see it, and you need to find the most suitable project to do that because it's not going to go on Wikipedia. It'll go on Wikisource in that case. So do just bear those projects in mind. Now there's two other things I need to mention before I wrap up, which are two policies that will affect everybody who's here today. Are you all here in work time? Yeah, is there anybody not? Some of you are retired. Yeah, okay, perhaps it won't affect you so much then, but the rest of you it will. The Wikimedia Foundation has a hardline policy on most of the projects that you have to declare if you're paid to edit. Now that doesn't mean, it doesn't matter whether you're paid because you're here in work time to learn to edit Wikipedia, or whether somebody has come up to you and said, I'll give you 50 quid if you'll write a Wikipedia article about my shop. Across the board, if you're paid to edit, you have to declare it. So all but those of you who are here as volunteers in retirement will have to declare that today. It doesn't stop you doing anything, it just means you have to declare it. And if you want to edit Wikipedia in your own time about something that you don't want to associate with your work identity, you can have two accounts and keep them completely separate. That's not a problem. So you can have one at the weekend where you edit about your favourite boy band that you don't want your colleagues to know about, and one where you edit about your scientific work that you wouldn't want to pollute with stuff about the same boy band. The other policy is an English Wikipedia specific policy, and that is the conflict of interest policy. And if you put 5 Wikipedians in a room, you will get at least 7 interpretations of the Wikipedia conflict of interest policy. Some of them will tell you the policy says you may not edit where you have a conflict of interest, and that is false. What it says is you are recommended not to. And of course there's always some wriggle room there. So generally we would suggest you don't write about your own organisation or about something where you have a vested interest, like your partner's company or something where you have a financial stake, for instance. But you can do if what you write is scrupulously neutral and appropriate for Wikipedia. So if you're here from a learned society like the Physiological Society, and the Physiological Society moves, excuse me, moves office, then it's quite legitimate and proper and reasonable for you to put the new address into Wikipedia. If the president of the society changes at the annual general meeting, it's quite legitimate for you to mention that the new one is in post and the old one has now stepped down. Where you get into problems is where you put in that the society is the best one of its kind for this field, or it has a special offer for members who join up before Christmas. And that's obviously very promotional, and you'll get into problems in the grey area between the two extremes. So if you're not sure, today obviously you can ask me or one of the other Wikipedians who I'll introduce in a moment. But when you're not here with us to ask us, you can use the same discussion pages that you use if you have a dispute. So you can go to a page and say, look, I work for this organisation, but I think you should know we've launched a new scheme for X. Here's the web page where you can find out more about it. Could somebody else add something, please? And it's perfectly legitimate for you to do that on a discussion page because you're not editing the actual article, and somebody else who's neutral will take a view as to whether to include it. So do bear that in mind if you're editing about your organisation. One remove from that, if you're editing about a person who's a member of your organisation, whether they're in a post like being the president or the chief exec or simply somebody you perhaps awarded your annual prize to, that's legitimate as long as you're not simply writing about their role in your organisation. You need to be writing about them in their rounded career in more general terms. And it's always a good idea to declare a conflict of interest, even if it's not a paid one, just because it covers your back if people complain about it later on.